All right, folks, ready to dive into a classic.
Always ready for a deep dive.
Today we're cracking open How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Ah, Dale Carnegie, a legend.
It's one of those books everyone's heard of. But
That maybe haven't actually read.
right, like it's sitting on their shelf looking all wise and
A little dusty, perhaps?
yeah. So we're gonna dust it off together.
And see if it's still got that magic touch.
Because let's be real, who couldn't use a little help with, well, winning friends and influencing people?
Absolutely. It's the human jungle out there.
Especially these days.
Oh, yeah. Relationships, work, life in general.
Yeah.
It's all about connecting.
So Carnegie kicks off with a pretty bold statement. Criticism is futile.
Straight to the point, isn't he?
He is, and it gets you thinking, right? Like, have you ever been on the receiving end of some harsh criticism?
Ooh, yeah, who hasn't?
I mean, think back to that moment. How did it make you feel?
Defensive, definitely. Like a wall was going up.
Yeah, like, nope, not listening.
Exactly. Our brains just shut down when we feel attacked.
Makes sense. It's like a survival instinct.
It is. And Carnegie's saying, well, that reaction is pretty universal.
So trying to get through with criticism, it's like talking to a brick wall.
You said it. And what's fascinating is how history's packed with examples of this backfiring big time.
Oh, yeah.
Like, remember that whole Roosevelt-Taft drama?
Oh, man, those two. What a political showdown.
Right. So Roosevelt, after he left office, he went on this, like, criticism rampage against Taft's policies.
Couldn't resist, could he?
And guess what? The whole Republican Party fractured.
Split right down the middle.
Yep, paving the way for Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat, to snag the presidency.
Talk about unintended consequences.
Oh, yeah. Just goes to show, criticizing someone, even if you think you're right.
It can have some serious ripple effects.
Absolutely. And speaking of ripple effects, how about the Teapot Dome scandal?
Ooh, yeah, that was a doozy.
So we've got Harding's Secretary of the Interior, Albert B. Fall.
Not exactly a household name.
But he's the guy who got caught handing out government oil reserves like party favors
His buddies, no less.
for bribes. The whole thing blew up, tarnished Harding's legacy, and landed Fall in jail.
It's like a masterclass in how not to handle things.
Right. Zero diplomacy, too much criticism, and bam, disaster.
Makes you wonder how often we do the same thing, just on a smaller scale.
All the time, I'd bet. We criticize without really thinking about the fallout.
Carnegie's point is, instead of tearing people down, why not build them up?
With appreciation.
And he backs it up, quoting William James, the father of American psychology.
Heavy hitter.
James said, "The deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated."
Not wanting, craving. It's deep stuff.
And I think everyone can relate to that.
Oh, totally. We all want to feel valued, recognized for what we bring to the table.
And it's not just about throwing out compliments.
Right. It's about genuinely seeing the good in others, their talents, their effort.
Even their quirks.
Absolutely. Instead of focusing on what's wrong, we should highlight what we appreciate.
Makes a huge difference, doesn't it?
Huge. Think about Stevie Wonder. Imagine him as a kid struggling in a traditional classroom.
Oh, yeah. Can't picture him excelling in that setting.
Right. But then a teacher comes along, and instead of focusing on his blindness, they zero in on his incredible hearing.
A total shift in perspective.
And boom, Stevie Wonder's life changes.
All because someone appreciated his unique abilities.
It's powerful stuff. But on the flip side, there's John Dillinger.
Okay, notorious bank robber, right?
Yep. His story shows how that same need for recognition can go down a very different path.
He craved importance, but sought it through notoriety, through fear.
And it ended tragically.
So appreciation is key, but where's the line between that and just plain flattery?
Ah, good question. Flattery's all about you. Trying to get something, it's fake, and people can smell it a mile away.
It's like putting on a cheesy grin.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But genuine appreciation, that comes from the heart.
It's about seeing a good and acknowledging it. No strings attached.
No ulterior motives.
So how do we get better at expressing that kind of genuine appreciation?
Start by paying attention. Notice the good stuff people are doing, big or small. Their efforts, talents, even their little quirks.
Like their funky dance moves.
Exactly. And then express it. A simple thank you, a note, a heartfelt compliment.
You know, it's amazing how a genuine compliment can turn someone's day around.
It's true. It can boost their confidence, make them feel like they matter.
Which can then inspire them to do even better.
Exactly. It's like a positive feedback loop.
So the more we practice expressing appreciation, the more natural it becomes.
It becomes part of who we are, and that's when we start seeing those miraculous results Carnegie talks about.
Okay, so ditch the criticism, embrace the appreciation. What's next on this friend-winning, people-influencing journey?
Well, Carnegie introduces a principle that might sound a little, well, manipulative at first.
Uh-oh, I'm intrigued.
But when you really understand it, it's actually quite profound. He calls it bait the hook to suit the fish.
Now, that's a phrase that sticks with you.
It is, isn't it?
So break it down for us. What's he getting at?
It's about understanding that everyone's different.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like, you wouldn't use strawberries to catch a fish, right?
Unless it was a very particular fish.
True. But the point is, you wouldn't use the same approach to persuade everyone. You got to figure out what makes them tick, what they truly desire.
And then tailor your approach accordingly.
Bingo.
So it's about empathy, stepping into their shoes.
Exactly. Put yourself in their world for a minute.
I'm starting to see where this is going.
Good. Now, take Lord George, the Prime Minister of Britain during World War I. He was amazing at rallying people to his cause.
What was his secret?
He was a master at understanding what people wanted and framing his arguments in a way that resonated with them.
So instead of pushing our own agenda
We got to shift gears.
and focus on what the other person wants.
That's a game changer. It is. And it's not about manipulation. It's about effective communication.
It's about meeting them where they are.
Exactly.
So how did Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate himself, put this into practice?
Imagine you're young, ambitious, and you get a letter from your rich Uncle Andrew.
Okay, I'm listening.
And in this letter, he's praising you up and down, talking about all your accomplishments.
I'd be feeling pretty good about myself.
Right. Then he drops the bomb. He's investing a huge sum of money in your name.
Whoa, that's taking things to another level.
It is. And that's what Carnegie did with his nieces and nephews. These glowing letters, making them feel like $1 million.
But there's a twist, right?
There is. He never actually sent the money.
He was playing mind games.
In a way, yeah. He understood the power of making people feel important,
Yeah.
appreciated, and he used this unconventional tactic to nurture that feeling.
It's sneaky, but I kind of admire it.
It is a bit sneaky, but brilliant in its simplicity.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this beat the hook thing works, but let's get practical. Any real-world examples?
Carnegie talks about two salesmen. One, we'll call him Carl, he's pretty passive, drops by a client's office, mentions a new policy, says he'll be back.
Doesn't sound like he's breaking any sales records.
Nope. No effort to understand their needs, no urgency.
What about salesman number 2?
This guy, John, he's a whole different animal. Walks in with energy, enthusiasm, asks questions, figures out what the client needs.
He's doing his research.
Exactly. Then he presents his product as the solution to their specific problem. Paints a picture of how it will benefit them directly.
He's baiting the hook with a custom lure.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And the result? John closes the deal. Carl walks away empty-handed.
It's a classic example of how understanding what the other person wants is crucial.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, I'm sold on baiting the high, but in a world where everyone's trying to stand out, how do we make a memorable first impression?
Carnegie says, remember and use people's names.
Seriously.
That's it. Seriously. It's so basic, but you'd be amazed how many people mess it up.
I guess in the rush to impress, we forget the simple stuff.
We do. But hearing your own name, it's like magic. It makes you feel seen, acknowledged.
Like you matter.
Exactly.
You know, I've always been impressed by politicians who seem to remember everyone's name.
Is that a superpower?
It feels like it.
It's a skill and one you can learn.
So how'd they do it?
Take Jim Farley, the guy who managed FDR's campaign back in '32. He was famous for his name recall.
32, that's going way back.
It is. But Farley had a system. When he met someone, he'd learn their full name, get some details, family, work, even their politics.
He was building a whole profile in his head.
He was. And he'd create a mental image linking those details to their face.
That's next level memory work.
Right. But you don't have to be a politician to use this. Just make a conscious effort.
Repeat their name during the conversation.
Write it down later if you need to.
So it's not just about remembering, it's about using their name in a way that shows you care.
Exactly. Think about it. You're in a busy cafeteria line, and the person behind the counter, they see hundreds of faces a day.
They're probably feeling pretty invisible.
Right. But then you smile and say, hello, Eunice, using their name tag.
Suddenly, they're a person again.
Boom. You've made a connection.
I've totally experienced that. It's a small thing, but it changes the whole vibe.
It's all about those little things that make people feel valued.
Okay, we've covered ditching criticism, embracing appreciation, baiting the hook, and remembering names. My head's spinning. But what about the art of conversation itself?
Carnegie says, become a good listener.
Wait, you're telling me the key to being a better talker is to, well, talk less?
It sounds crazy, but it's true. The best conversations happen when we actually listen.
I guess when someone really listens to us, it makes us feel important.
Like they genuinely care about what we have to say.
Like they're hanging on our every word.
Exactly.
Didn't Carnegie tell a story about a dinner party where he basically barely spoke a word?
He did. He spent the whole evening listening to a botanist talk about plants.
Sounds riveting.
Right.
Right?
But afterwards, the botanist told the host that Carnegie was the most interesting conversationalist he'd ever met.
All because he listened.
All because he listened. It shows the power of being present, attentive.
So asking questions, showing genuine interest.
That's it. Sometimes the best way to connect is to simply be there, fully engaged.
It's like a subtle form of flattery, isn't it? Like you're saying, you're fascinating.
Exactly. And that feeling of being heard can create a strong bond.
I'm starting to see how all these principles fit together. It's about building respect, appreciation, genuine interest.
A solid foundation for any interaction.
Whether it's personal, professional, or even just with strangers.
Right. We're laying the groundwork for positive connections.
This is making so much sense.
Good. Glad you're on board.
But we're just scratching the surface here.
We are. There's a whole lot more to uncover in how to win friends and influence people.
Buckle up, folks. We're just getting started.
The journey continues.
We're back, folks. Still diving deep into how to win friends and influence people.
Ready for round 2?
I'm really intrigued by this whole make people feel important thing. It keeps popping up in the book.
It's a cornerstone of Carnegie's philosophy.
So tell me more. Why is it such a big deal?
Well, Carnegie argues it's practically a law of human conduct.
A law, huh? That's pretty serious.
It is. It boils down to this. Always make the other person feel important.
Sounds simple enough.
It is, but we often forget it. We get caught up in our own stuff, you know?
Oh yeah, we forget that everyone, no matter who they are, wants to feel like they matter.
Exactly. We all crave that sense of significance, of having a purpose.
So when we make others feel important,
We tap into that universal need.
it's like we're giving them a gift.
It is a gift,
And
one that keeps on giving.
okay, but how do we actually do this? What are some practical ways to make people feel important?
It can be as simple as practicing good manners, saying please and thank you, apologizing when we mess up.
The basics.
The basics are huge. They show respect, make people feel valued.
It's like that golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Exactly. Carnegie has some great stories about people who put this into practice.
Like that story about Chris, the student who was struggling.
Oh yeah, Chris. He was so shy, lacked confidence, struggling to keep up in school.
Sounded like he needed a champion.
He did. And that's where his teacher, Mr. Rowland, came in.
What did he do?
Mr. Rowland saw something special in Chris, recognized his potential. So he invited him to join the advanced class.
Wow, talk about a confidence boost.
Right. Chris was overwhelmed. He even asked, "Am I good enough?"
I can imagine how he felt.
And Mr. Rowland's response was perfect. He said, "Yes, Chris, you are good enough."
Simple, but so powerful.
It was. Chris blossomed in that advanced class. His confidence soared, grades improved.
It's amazing how a little encouragement can change someone's trajectory.
It really is. And speaking of encouragement, remember that story about the man and the elderly woman?
The one with the Packard car?
That's the one. He simply appreciated her home, her belongings, showed genuine interest.
And she was so touched she gave him her car.
It's incredible. It shows how deeply we crave appreciation, to be seen and acknowledged.
It's like she was starved for connection.
And when she finally received it, her gratitude overflowed.
What a beautiful story.
It is. Reminds us that even small acts of kindness can have huge ripple effects.
Okay, so making people feel important is key. But let's switch gears a bit. What about this dramatization thing?
Ah, yes. Carnegie was a big believer in showmanship, in presenting ideas in a way that grabs attention.
Making it memorable.
Exactly. He compares it to movies, commercials, those dramatic images, compelling stories.
It's like they're tapping into our emotions.
Exactly.
But how do we use that in everyday life? I mean, we're not all directing Hollywood films.
True. But we can still use those same principles to make our ideas more engaging, more persuasive.
Got any examples?
There's that great story about the salesman trying to convince a shopkeeper to upgrade his cash registers.
Okay, what did he do? Give him the hard sell.
Nope. He took a handful of pennies and threw them on the floor.
He just threw money away, he did.
Then he said, You're throwing away pennies every time a customer uses your old register.
That's a bold move.
It was. But it created this powerful visual, this sound that stuck with the shopkeeper.
He made his point in a way that was impossible to ignore.
Exactly. The shopkeeper was so impressed, he ordered new registers on the spot.
See?
Yeah.
Show, don't tell.
That's the heart of dramatization. Make it fun, engaging, memorable.
I like it.
Carnegie even talks about how parents can use this with their kids.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Instead of nagging them to clean up their toys, one father turned it into a game.
Genius.
Right. The kids pretended they were a train, loading their coal toys into the caboose, a wagon.
That's so much better than yelling, "Clean your room."
It is. It's about making things fun, appealing to people's imaginations.
I'm totally stealing that idea.
Go for it.
Okay, so dramatization is a great tool. But what about those tough conversations? You know, addressing problems, delivering bad news.
Those are never easy.
Nope. How do we do it without creating conflict or resentment?
Carnegie has a magic phrase for these situations. Ready for it.
Hit me with it.
I don't blame you one iota for feeling as you do. If I were you, I would undoubtedly feel just as you do.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
It is. But it works wonders.
How so?
You're acknowledging their feelings, validating their perspective, showing empathy.
You're taking the sting out of it.
Exactly.
Didn't Carnegie tell a story about a tenant using this phrase with his landlady?
He did. The tenant was late on his rent expecting a fight.
Yikes.
But instead of making excuses, he used that magic phrase. He said, I don't blame you one iota.
And
the landlady was floored. She ended up forgiving the late rent.
wow, that's amazing.
That's the power of empathy. It disarms people, opens the door for understanding.
It's like her anger just melted away when she felt heard.
Exactly. Carnegie himself used this phrase with a reader who had written him a scathing letter.
Oh man, I hate getting those.
Right, but instead of getting defensive, he used that phrase, acknowledged her perspective.
What happened?
The reader wrote back, apologizing for her tone.
See? It's like catching more flies with honey than with vinegar.
Couldn't agree more. Empathy is a powerful tool.
This is making me rethink how I handle difficult situations.
Good. It's about shifting our mindset, approaching things with understanding.
It's about building bridges instead of walls.
Exactly.
I'm really starting to see how all these principles connect.
They're all about building strong, positive connections with people.
That's what makes Carnegie's work so timeless. It's about the human element.
It is.
Back again for more. How to win friends and influence people.
Ready to wrap up this deep dive?
I am. Feeling inspired to put all this wisdom into action.
That's the spirit.
So far, we've ditched the criticism, embraced the appreciation,
Learn to bait the hook.
and mastered the art of listening. What else does Carnegie have up his sleeve?
Let's talk about challenges. Carnegie was a big believer in their power.
I like that. It's like a little push to be our best.
Exactly. It taps into that desire to achieve, to excel.
Kind of like friendly competition.
Yeah. He tells a great story about Charles Schwab, the steel tycoon.
Okay, I'm listening.
There was this mill struggling to meet production goals. The manager had tried everything, but nothing was working.
So what did Schwab do? Come in and yell at everyone?
Nope. He walked into the mill, took a piece of chalk, and wrote a big 6 on the floor.
A 6? What was that supposed to mean?
When the night shift came in, they saw the 6 and asked about it. The day shift told them Schwab had asked how many heats they'd produced, and they'd said 6.
So he just wrote it down?
He did. And the night shift, they saw it as a challenge, a benchmark to beat.
Ah, I see where this is going.
They worked their tails off and ended up producing 7 heats. They erased the 6 and wrote a 7.
I bet the day shift was fired up when they saw that.
Oh yeah, they were determined to outdo the night shift. They ended up producing 10 heats.
All thanks to a little chalk mark.
That simple act sparked a wave of motivation.
It's amazing how a little nudge can make such a difference.
It's about tapping into people's intrinsic motivation, that desire to prove themselves, to be part of a winning team.
It's like a game, almost.
It is, and it can be incredibly effective.
Makes you wonder what kind of challenges we could use in our own lives.
Right. It doesn't have to be about work. It could be about personal goals, fitness, anything.
Challenge accepted. But let's face it, we all make mistakes along the way.
That's part of being human.
How do we address those mistakes in a way that encourages growth? You know, without crushing someone's spirit.
Carnegie says, start with praise and honest appreciation.
Wait, praise someone when they've messed up.
It's not about condoning the mistake. It's about acknowledging their strengths, reminding them of their value, before addressing the issue.
It's like that sandwich technique. Positive, negative, positive.
Perfect analogy. It softens the blow, makes sure they feel respected even when they've slipped up.
Carnegie had an example of this, right? With Charles Schwab again.
He did. Schwab had a mill manager who wasn't hitting production targets. Instead of yelling, he said, "How is it that a manager as capable as you can't make this mill produce what it should?"
He's basically saying, I believe in you, but we need to fix this.
Exactly. It's so much more effective than just criticizing. It shows you respect them and trust their ability to improve.
It's about focusing on solutions, not dwelling on the problem.
And it preserves their dignity, makes them more receptive to feedback.
It's a much more constructive approach. I'm going to try that.
I think you'll be surprised by the results.
Okay, challenges. Starting with praise. What's the final takeaway?
Carnegie calls it, give a dog a good name.
Now, what's that supposed to mean?
It's about the power of expectations. When we give someone a positive reputation to live up to, they often rise to the occasion.
It's like we're setting the bar high.
Exactly. And people tend to strive to meet that expectation. Carnegie tells a story about a mechanic whose work had gotten sloppy.
Uh-oh. Sounds like trouble.
Right. But instead of firing him, his manager called him in and said, "You're one of the best mechanics we've ever had. I know you can do better."
He gave him a reputation to uphold.
He did. And the mechanic, hearing those words of confidence, stepped up his game. He didn't want to disappoint his manager.
It's like that saying, fake it till you make it.
Kind of. Except in this case, he was given a genuine belief to live up to.
Powerful stuff. Any other examples of this in action?
There's another story about a bad boy student, always getting in trouble.
Sounds like a tough case.
Right. But one teacher saw his potential and decided to treat him as a leader. She'd say things like, "I'm depending on you to make this class the best in the school."
Wow, she put a lot of faith in him.
She did. And the boy, hearing those words, started to see himself differently. He wanted to be the leader she believed he could be.
Those stories are amazing. It shows how much our words and beliefs can influence others.
It's about seeing the potential in people and giving them a chance to shine.
This has been an incredible deep dive. So much to think about.
Right. And hopefully a lot to put into practice.
Absolutely. Carnegie's principles are timeless. They're about building genuine connections, understanding and respecting others.
It's about making the effort to create a more positive and harmonious world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us, folks.